Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? The back? Very good. Always tough to follow a New Yorker when it comes to speed of talking. So thank you very much, Dario and the team. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm very excited to be part of this meeting. And I have to say, yesterday, as I was getting tons of emails, but also trying to focus on what's at hand, I learned quite a bit of where our industry is going. Just a bit of background. So my name is Harout Semerjian, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Ipsen. Ipsen is the third largest French pharma company. We celebrate 90 years this year. And over the last few years, we've been in a transformation journey where we really saw that to be independent and continue to be thriving, we need to grow, and we need to grow fast. So we have been on a transformation journey, and over the last 2 years, we've been now growing at 20% plus every year. Now we're in the top quadrant of growth of companies with sales more than €1 billion, and we have cracked in the top 15 oncology players. So we play in 3 areas: oncology, neurosciences, and rare disease, where in the last couple of weeks, we have also announced our biggest deal ever, that we enter into the rare disease. So all these are very high-touch, patient-focused programs, and we have been on our journey as well for patient centricity, which has been discussed yesterday quite a bit, and I hope I can share some personal reflections using some examples from our business that can help the group. In this slide, actually, this is not a Photoshop. This is I'd like to introduce you to Ronnie. Ronnie and his wife, Christine. Ronnie is 63 years old. In 2010, he was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic neuroendocrine tumor. This is one of the niche oncology tumors that we operate in. And since then, Ronnie has been on a journey of really making sure that the awareness about his disease and options are really at the forefront of pharmaceutical companies and anybody else. So I'm personally very inspired by his story, by how much he is online, how much he has really pushed us and other companies to innovate every day. So I want to make sure that we start with that. Now, yesterday's presenters did a great job to really highlight that there isn't really a company that gets into business and doesn't want to be patient-centric, right? I mean, that we kind of established that that's the case. The question is how? Especially in an era where patients, rightfully so, are demanding to be in the middle of the decisions that people are taking on their behalf. So if you think about the business model in other areas, the customer is always king, right? Here, the customer was kind of on the side, but folks, especially healthcare professionals who have dedicated their life for the well-being of patients, are really kind of entrusted to take all the decisions. And yesterday, some of the panel members have mentioned that it's not about all the decisions, it's about co-creation of these decisions. And more, this group is really becoming more empowered. Some statistics as well to share with you, like other presenters. The vast majority of times when our patients are going to see their healthcare professionals, pretty much they've done their homework, they've done their research online. This is something that all of us intimately know very well. And when you talk with some of the customers, it's something that really keeps them on their toes, because in that information there's some good information and there's some questionable ones. At the same time, half of them are tracking their health, especially now with wearables and other ways, and not just doing that, but also sharing it with their healthcare professionals, which is the other part. Now you have a lot of longitudinal data versus just spot data. And the vast majority of the time, patients are using and demanding certain medications. We know that. This is an EU5 research, but it also applies to other parts of the world. And last but not least, we saw an example of telehealth, and 1 out of 3 patients today in EU5 is using telehealth, has reported using that in the last 12 months. I've actually done that twice in the last year in the UK, in London, where I live, and I have to say it's really exceeded my expectations. Kind of looking at it and saying, really? But in both cases, it was very good experience, and I will definitely do that again. Now, we know the technology, how much it's playing a key role, and that's something other people can do a much better job in explaining what that means. But what I wanted to take from that is really, this part. You know, technology and companies like us. And you're trying to kind of work this out. So you have the technology aspect, which is by design, you started off, you have a version 1, right? You by the time you're launching an iPhone, you already know what you want to do is launch a new one and a new one. However, you're looking at companies where the conservative model or the classical model of the business is the downside is much of getting it wrong is much more than the upside of getting it right. So what do I mean by that? Is if you're in a company like ours and you can do 6, 7 good things, one poster example where a patient information is misplaced or where you're having some inappropriate discussion that has been kind of deemed that somebody else should have done it in the company, the repercussions of that is very big. And the upside of that, is, okay, you got it right, and that's a good thing. So how do you reconcile those two things where technology by design is about innovation, getting it wrong, you say, okay, version 2, version 3 will be better, but on the human side, it can be detrimental. So that's kind of what we have been grappling with for some time, and we believe that the patient centricity actually can bridge that gap between people in companies like pharmaceuticals like us and the technology aspect, where we're all aligned on what is really at hand, and that is helping the patients get the right therapy at the right time. That's how we were looking at patient centricity. But then how do you translate that interesting global aspiration into real life in every country? We operate in 40 countries direct. Our medicines are in 115 countries, and we are one of the smaller players, let alone some of the major pharma companies. How do you translate that vision into a daily reality? And many times, people joke that my job is the chief commercial officer, but the second C really, is chief cultural officer. So a lot of times it's about how do you translate that into daily living every day on every small decisions that the team members are making. We believe that, this is an approach that has been working with us better than before. It doesn't mean it's perfect, it just means it's better than before. And we wanted to share some of that learnings. First and foremost, developing a patient engagement framework. However simple that sounds, there are so many renaming of similar concepts. Once you call it patient advocacy, once you call it patient engagement, once you call it customer centricity, once you call it patient centricity. The idea is just pick one and stick to it, at least for some time. Because it's very difficult for an organization to adopt a certain methodology of working if you're going to be renaming it every other day. And that's one thing which, we've kind of been very adamant is to say, what is the version? When does this start? When is the next time we revisit it? And we kind of lock it in 12-month chunks. The second thing, which is quite dear to my heart and something, again, very simple to put on a slide, but very difficult to get in reality, is the training of our people across the countries. So the biggest insight that we found why we weren't really doing this well and consistently is because a lot of our folks did not really know where is that line. Where is that line? Because it's shifting all the time, and given that we were a growth story, that means we were expanding ourselves. We went from 3,000 people to 4,000 people, 5,000, 6,000 within a 3-year period. So you have all the different folks coming from different companies, and they've learned in different ways. How do you do it in Pfizer? How do you do it in Novartis? How do you do it in this company or that company? And it was proving actually to be problematic when you don't have a singular way of how do we want to do it, right or wrong, but just making sure that it's really consistent. and putting everyone through that training to ensure that we all know where the line is and where do we need to be. Because one of two things was happening. Either folks were crossing it without intention or without realizing, because in their company it was different, or they're staying 10 feet inside just to make sure that everybody's safe. And both of them, is opportunities lost. So we made sure that we have a systematic way, and we're up to 1,000 people now out of the 5,000 people what we have in the countries, and about 1,000 in manufacturing. So we're really putting everyone through that training. And the other part is globally we don't develop global solutions. We develop global platforms, but the content is all local. And then each country, depending on who do they have as advocates, will be able to populate their own content. So this is a busy slide, but the whole intent is that now we've been piloting different programs throughout the value chain. So if you take a look at in research and development, for example, most of the time our projects are led by a seasoned clinician, somebody who's been in clinic, who has been working before, and now they're leading a big project. And to put them through a patient journey exercise, has been met with, let's say, some skepticism. Right? So it's like, what do you mean you want to put me through a patient journey exercise? I was seeing patients, But yes, the thing was that was 5 years ago. And if you haven't really kept up, you might think the science has moved on, or you were practicing in a certain jurisdiction, and that might be different in other parts of the world. So if you're practicing, let's say in Germany, and you're trying to have a global patient view, or if you're practicing in the US, you can imagine how much peculiarities there are across the world. So to have that systematic approach has been quite interesting, to put it the least. Another example, which is also quite dear to our hearts, is so we have one of our biggest products. It's called somatilin. It just hit blockbuster this year with sales more than $1 billion in area that we've been operating for 15 years plus. And this is being used by acromegaly patients, and patients in this disease area are characterized by larger arms. And one of the things that we can do with this medication is you can actually do self-injection. And one of the things which our researchers were doing is, what was the issue that was really hindering from more patients taking on self-injection? Because this is a monthly injection, pretty much for life, right? And it's a quite straightforward one, but the pickup was not that universal across. And one of the aha moments, now we look back and we think about it, it's very obvious, but we didn't know it at the time, is when you have that big hands and we're putting a small syringe in your hands, good luck in, self-injecting, right? But it might sound obvious, but it took us at least 200 rounds of iterative patient engagement work to really come up with something which is very obvious. So, and there was a lot of debate, because these are products that at one point in the near future will go off generic. So is it really worth continuing to invest in new technology on products that might be going off patent? And I'm very proud to say the answer was yes, and we just are launching our bigger syringe as we speak around the world. And that was really pushed through by our patient partners, who really said it's the right thing to do. And internally, we were really inspired by that. Now, coming back to Ronnie has been a patient that we've been very fortunate to come across. As we were doing part of our outreach, our social listening, our understanding who the influencers are in this area, we saw that Ronnie, in this very niche oncology tumor type, he had more than 800,000 viewers on his blogs, which is a significant number for such a niche disease. So we've been working with Ronnie. He's been really guiding us on so many of our aspects when it comes to neuroendocrine disease. not just from a therapy perspective, but what do you do? What are your biggest issues, and what are your biggest opportunities, and where can we help? And more importantly, how can you help patients like you? And with the help of Ronnie, we've developed Living with Net's website. I mean, you might think it's just another website, and it is in many ways, but it's really inspired by patients for patients. And we've been working with him and some of the people that he will pull in to say, okay, what else needs to happen? What else, what kind of information do we need to have over there? And, really having real cases all the way from, if you're suspecting your diagnosis, all the way to how do you live with your daily life when it comes to your diseases. And of course, the team is very happy that it got one of the awards recently in 2018. But more importantly for me is when you see Ronnie saying, I wish I had this kind of information back in 2010 when I was diagnosed. That for us is a very big reward by itself. So the key thing really, my message over here is that we had to learn it the hard way that, we really had to put folks, people come to work every day with the right intentions. They want to make a difference. They want to do the right thing. And, see the digital technologies, and they talk with vendor partners, and you see the world moving into that direction. It's just not enough to stop there. The commitment to really making a difference by going systematically through the whole organization, making sure that the awareness is there, making sure that the adoption, people understand how to do it. If we don't give that to our teams, then you're going to have, like what we had was, one digital native in the company and trying to do something, and then the rest kind of being skeptical, and it doesn't work. Or the other side saying, in order to be patient-centric, we need a department for patient centricity. That doesn't work as well, because it's not about one person being, holding that fort. It's about an entire company knowing how to help patients within their daily jobs, that's what they do. And that's kind of where we're going next. So utilizing technology, obviously, it's something here. It's not like the clock is going to go backwards, but how do you do that? That's going to be quite important. And one of the things that I started in the pharma business 25 years ago, inspired by my own personal story and my cousin who had to, who passed out because of a hematological malignancy. And if I see the amount of information that now new parents would have for their children, where my uncle and his wife didn't have at the time, I'm really inspired by being part of that journey, and I want to continue with that. And these are not rocket science things, but one of the things which I would urge us is to look at beyond just the technology, to look at beyond just the cool stuff, and really have that commitment of how do we do that in mass. That's going to be the area where either these things stay cool, very nice discussions, or they're really embedded into organizations and they can make a difference. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you.